My name is Kristia van Heerden. I am the CEO of JustOneLap.com and I host a podcast called The Fat Wallet Show. I got into dates through a series of really stupid decisions, really. I only have myself to blame. To be fair, at the time, I knew nothing about really basic financial concepts like interest. So I didn't really understand why you have to pay back a lot more than you borrowed. And it took me a little while to figure that out. And by the time I figured it out, I was already 100,000 Rand down. And I had to struggle to make my way out of that. Everybody asks what I was buying with all that money. Unfortunately, I have nothing good to show for it. I was basically spending it on my social life, hanging out with friends, going to restaurants, clothes. People don't realize that they trap themselves when they take on certain kinds of date. When you take on really big dates, like for a house and a car, what you're really doing is you're adding to your expense base every month. And that really limits the amount of choices that you have. If you're no longer happy in your job, you can't just leave because you've got this giant pile of debt that you have to service every month. If you want to make a career change, that becomes really, really difficult. Or if you want to go back to varsity. So I think that South Africans tend to think, oh, I'm taking on debt, but it's a good debt because, I'm getting a family home, or I'm buying a car, or, my family is growing. I hear this a lot. My family is growing and therefore, but I have to get this new car or I have to get this new house. We don't realize how that limits our lifestyle. Houses and cars are a big problem for South Africans. They tend to be this misconception that if your date is for a house or a car, that it's somehow better. And it's not. A date is a date. It's a liability on your balance sheet. Every month you have to service that. You pay interest on that. It's always a difficult thing to deal with. So it's interesting because you think that you learn a lesson once and you never learn it again, but that really isn't how learning works. And we see this all the time in the Fat Wallet Show. Sometimes you learn a skill or you learn a lesson, but you only understand it a part of the way. And then later on, when you're ready, you learn it more. So I don't think I will ever get into that kind of debt ever again. But I did realize at the end of last year, I started using my credit card for day-to-day transactions. And even though I paid off the credit card in full at the end of every month, I realized because there was no limit on the credit card, or like a very high limit on the credit card, I tended to overspend. So this year I've drawn myself back again to just using cash. Like those habits that we have, it's kind of financial health is kind of like physical health. It's about making a good choice more often than a bad one. It's about realizing when you're sliding and coming and going and giving yourself a little bit of space and a little bit of grace to do that. It's not a zero-sum game. If you make a good choice more often than a bad one, you'll get out ahead.